Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. Today's recipe of Mattar Pilau was requested by a very lovely girl and Shakira, this is for you. And Shakira, you always make my day with your lovely comments. You always write the sweetest things, so I just wanted to say thank you as well. So first of all, just for the pilau rice, I'm just going to show you using 1 cup of rice. This is a size cup that I've used. With pilau rice, it is better to use the longest grain rice that you can find. Although they generally take a little bit longer to cook, they look nicer, the end result looks good, and I find that they become less mushy when you cook them. The rice I'm using at the moment is a little bit short grain, but I just need to quickly finish this bag. I think I prefer Trophy and Akash rice. I used to try Tilda Basmati and a few other ones, but I didn't really get on with them. So anyway, for the recipe I used 1 full cup of rice and also just over half a cup of frozen peas. I think I used a little bit more peas than I meant to, but that's okay, it just made a bigger portion of rice. So all I've done so far is I've soaked the rice for 30 minutes just to make sure that the rice is going to be softer and easier to cook, and this also removes all the starch when you cook the rice. I'm sure everyone already knows that, but that is why we soak rice, and then it'll be less sticky when we cook it in the end result, so it'll come out quite nice. And then because I'm making rice quite healthy, I'm not using much oil in my cooking anymore, so as long as the base of your pot is covered, I think I've used about 2 tablespoons of oil, but you can use about 2 to 4 tablespoons of oil, just making sure that the bottom is covered. This also makes it easier to cook the rice. And then I'm using fried onions, as this is a lot quicker to cook with and it has a really nice flavour. The onions are quite strong, so it really helps. So just 1 cupful of the fried onions. I would say that's about a really small handful of onions, so that's enough just to give it a little bit of flavour and enough to give colour to the pilau rice. And I've also added in about 1 teaspoon of cumin seeds, and I've just let the onion fry, then added the cumin seeds, and now the oil's really hot. The onions have gone a lot darker, so be really careful now, because what we need to do is add in our frozen peas. I would advise to probably add in a little bit of water to your onions before you do this, because mine really splashed and went everywhere because the pot was so hot, so I had to turn the gas off really quickly and just mixed in the peas, and then I put the gas back on. And what will happen is that the more you cook this, the more the onions will just disintegrate themselves, so you don't really have to do much. It's not much effort, and the peas at this stage will just need to fry in the little bit of oil that's already in there. And then also what I do is to cook the peas, I put in about a 1/4 cup of water, so just a little bit of water. That's enough for the peas to boil in, and that's because I don't really like peas undercooked in rice. And then what I do at this stage is I add in about just under 1 level tablespoon of salt, and with rice it's the salt that really helps bring out the flavour. And also what I do is I boil this quite a fair bit, and then what I do is I take about half a tablespoon of garam masala, so that's about 1 teaspoon of garam masala, so not much, otherwise it gets too thick and then it's a bit harder for it to just cook nicely. You don't want the pilau rice to be really thick, because then it goes a little bit mushy. So what I do is I let this cook and boil until the peas go really nice and soft and wrinkly, and you can tell when the peas are really starting to cook now, because when you use your spoon to mix, the peas start feeling a lot more lighter than they do at the start. At the start they feel still a little bit more heavier, but the more you cook them, the peas feel lighter, and then you can actually smell the peas cooking. So once that's pretty much at that stage, you can then add in a little bit of chili powder. I just add in just about half a teaspoon, a really small amount, just because with rice the chili powder is so strong, you don't really need to add much at all. Rice picks up and gives out a lot of flavor when it comes to chili. So as long as you remember, per cup of rice it's 1 tablespoon of salt and just half a spoon of chili powder is plenty, and it still comes through. So what you need to do is just keep mixing this now, because what we're going to do is dry all that water out, and you can see that the water is drying because the sort of the mixture of the base, it goes a lot more thicker, the onions are starting to disintegrate, and so the color of the water has pretty much now turned brown. And what we did is we fried the onion so much at the start, because it's the fried onions that give the dark color. So at this stage what I did is I just added in a little bit more water, because I thought my peas weren't as soft and wrinkly as I like them to be at this stage. So I was just giving them a little bit more extra time to cook, because with peas I just really don't like that earthy taste of them, of their sort of natural taste. So I like it when they're a lot more cooked, because then when they're a lot more been boiled for a lot longer, they just taste a little bit more sweeter and nicer, instead of I don't know how to describe it, but they just taste a lot nicer when they've been overcooked. So anyway, so that's how it looks. And after a minute you'll see, once I start stirring, you'll be able to see the bottom of the pot, and it'll be a lot more thicker. And what we want to do is to make sure that all the water that we put in does evaporate, because with rice we have to put a ratio of 2 glasses of water per cup of rice for it to boil within there in pilau rice, to make sure your rice doesn't go extra soft or extra mushy or stay undercooked. So that's why, to make sure the measurement of water that I put in afterwards is correct, I needed to make sure that I had dried up all the extra water that I put in at the start. So that's now done, and so now what I'm doing is I'm putting in my 2 cups of water for my 1 cup of rice, and this is the time to taste your rice. And if you feel that there's not enough salt in there, then you can add in just a small amount as well, because salt is, you don't really need to add too much salt in this rice either. 1 tablespoon should be plenty. So when you taste this mixture, what it should taste like is just it should just taste quite salty. The salt should come through. If you can't sense the salt coming through, that means you probably just need to add in another little bit more, pinch more of salt. So now all I'm going to do is just wait for this to come to the boil, and then I can just add in my soaked rice. When we've added in the rice and we've done the fast boil, to fast boil the rice, we're just going to put the lid on and keep the gas on high, and that's just going to make sure that the rice and the water cooks in the same time as quickly as the water dries up as well, because if you leave it in the water for too long, they can go quite mushy. So we just want to keep the process quite quick and not overdo it, and then that way whenever we need to do to the rice, when the water is all dried up, we can do in the dum stage. And to get to that point, we're just going to see when the rice just looks like it's simmering right at the end. There's going to be little bubbles popping up from the rice like this. This is how it looks now. So then at this stage, you just taste a few grains of the rice. If it's slightly undercooked, you'll then just make sure you put the lid straight back on with a tea towel on top to cover any gaps or holes, and leave it on the smallest hob on the lowest heat for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then give it a further 20 minutes just to cook within its own heat off the gas. And if it's overdone, if the rice is really soft, then you can just leave it to simmer with the lid off and on the gas, and it will be cooked for you. I hope that really made sense. And now I'm going to show you how to make quiche. This portion is pretty much enough for 2 people, but it's two very big hefty portions. And what I use is this baking tray because this is all I've got. I think preferably if you had one of those Victoria sponge cake sandwich tins, then they're a really good size to use, but because this is all I've got, this is what I use. And I cover this all in butter, and just make sure you cover all of the bottom and all the sides, because then this will really help to make sure that your quiche comes out nicely at the end without breaking as well, and it will really cook nicely in here as well. And the short crust pastry that I use is Tesco's own brand, and it's suitable for vegans, so just so you know, you don't have to feel uncomfortable using it. It's perfectly fine to use. And I actually can make it last for 2 quiches as long as you store it and use it within 3 days. So I actually made this recently, but then I've tried filming it, but it didn't come out right, so I'm just making it again just so that I can film this and show this to you as well in the same video. So what I did is I had put it away, and then I just re-rolled it out again, just big enough to make sure it covers the size of my tray, and just big enough to go dipped in the sides, and so that it's just a pastry that is completely enough with the baking tin basically. And then when you put this in, it's really soft and buttery already. Just try to make it fit by stretching it if you can, and line it so it's covered right to the top. Then you can just fill it right up, because when you join cooking, it will rise a little bit. And then also, once you've laid this in your tray, I'm not really that neat and tidy, but just trim the edges. And also what I did here is, because mine was enough to cover the sides, I just used these trimmings to go on the left and right side as well, on the top and bottom. But also, once you've laid in your short crust pastry, you just need to use a fork, or I'm going to use a knife here, but you just need to use a fork just to make little indents in the bottom of the tray. This helps it from, actually I can't remember why, but just remember to do that anyway. If you know why, maybe you can let me know in the comments below. But yeah, I'm not really that much of an artist, but I'm just going to use the pastry on the sides because I've already had this pastry in the week. I wasn't too fussed about presentation this time. So yeah, there we go. I've just made the little dabs in the bottom. I think it's just to make sure steam can escape, or so that it cooks nicely. Honestly, I can't really remember. I just know we're supposed to do it. And then, as you know, I don't really measure anything that accurately, but I'm going to use about half an onion. Usually I use red onions, but I didn't have any red onions at home this time, so I'm just going to use a normal onion. Okay, so I'm just going to cut half of an onion, and what I'll do is I'll try to dice it into small parts. What you can do is, once you slice some of the onion, is if you put it in some water and then pop it into the microwave for 1 or 2 minutes. You could do that if you like your onions extra soft, but I really don't feel the need to do that because I find that the onions cook inside the oven anyway, and even if you do get a little bit of the taste of the onion, it's actually quite a nice addition to offset the cheesy flavor as well. So I just whack this straight in as it is. So I just make thin slices of onion, and then I just cut that into little bits as well. But yeah, I generally do this with red onions, so if you do have that, or if you can get that, just use half of a red onion instead. It is a nicer flavor. And then you'll also need a tomato. The tomato is more just for the garnishing on top. I don't really put that inside of my quiche. You can do it if you want. You can try that and let me know how it goes. So I'm just going to put my onion into my mixing bowl, and so just so you know as well, the only ingredients you really need with this is onion, cheese, tomato, and your short crust pastry, and you can just add a little bit of black pepper at the end on top if you want. So with the onion, what you're going to do is you're going to take a whole egg. A medium-sized egg is better, but I only had large eggs at the moment, and then you just need to pop this into your mixing bowl and then give this a mix. But again, actually a large egg is fine if you prefer your quiche to be a lot more fluffy, but I do find that with quiche, the cheesier it is, the nicer it tastes. So the more cheese that you use, the nicer it will taste. So what you can do is, when you come to adding your cheese, I added about 3 big handfuls of cheese, so that's just over half my packet of grated cheese. And then what you do is, when you mix this in with your egg and your onion, you should see that the cheese has a light glaze over it, and that should come from the egg. You shouldn't see, like, it shouldn't look like an omelette. There should be a really good amount of cheese in here. So I'm just going to mix this up, and then you should see from the texture now as well that when it's really wet looking, this means you'll still need to add more cheese. So there's no really like exact measurement for this. Just go by however much you can tell will fit into whichever baking tray that you use. My measurements are always like this. I really just go by however much I think that will want. So at this point, on top of the 2 handfuls of cheese, I'm just adding my 3rd handful of cheese. And so by the end of this, now you can see it should just look like the cheese is glazed with the egg, like with the egg wash. And just want to mix this all in so that it's all covered. Okay, and then I'm just going to pop my mixture into the short crust pastry, and honestly, this is really like how easy it is. It literally was just chopped onion, grated cheese, which I buy like that, so I don't even make much of an effort grating the cheese. You can even use medium cheddar cheese, which gives it an even nicer taste as well. I think this one in particular is just a mild cheddar cheese, which still tastes quite nice. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold my edges down of the short crust pastry and tuck that in, and then there is one final step left after this. Okay, and that is what we are going to do, is we are going to put our tomatoes on the top, which we left for garnishing. But then not only that, what you need to do is you need to get another egg, but this time instead of mixing it fully, you'll just have to give it a very, very light mix. And then what we'll do is we'll spoon a little bit of that mixture on top. Now, as I said before, I've got large sized eggs, so over here I'm going to give this a really light mix just to separate the yolk a little bit from the egg white, and then I'll pour some of this on top just to glaze it with, and this will help with the cooking process. If you have a medium or small size egg, then you can just go ahead and add all of that straight on top, but as I said, I'm just using spoonfuls, and I'm just going to put some of this on top of the tomato and some of this on top of the pastry. It is quite hard because it's so gloopy. It's really, really hard to control, so sometimes you might find that you get a lot more of it in certain areas than the others, and it's hard to distribute and spread, but there you go. But try to do this step the best you can anyway. And meanwhile, just so you know, preheat your oven to 220 degrees on a fan assisted oven, and then I personally don't put mine in for just 20 minutes. I actually give mine a good baking in the center of the oven for about 40 minutes, or maybe because it's my tray it's a lot deeper, so I let it sit in there for about 40 minutes and then turn the oven off, and I let it sit in there for about another 20 minutes in the heat, just to make sure that it's not runny or anything. And that is all. I hope you enjoyed this. Please do give me a like if you did. Thanks, bye.